The movement delivered a message.
We understand that the community, the nation, doesn't trust the police much.
Now calls for change.
We need radical change. We need effective change, and we haven't gotten that, ever.
Are becoming a call to action.
I'm not the same person that I was 4 weeks ago.
And if we took some of that money and put it into the underserved communities, into some after-school programs, into some job creation, we wouldn't have the crime that we have.
Get them off of me!
We've brought together community leaders and Charlotte's new police chief
To be able to take on this leadership role, it means a great deal to me.
for a conversation about race and police reform. Here now, Janine Davis.
And welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to be here to have a lively conversation and an honest conversation and a real conversation with these fine folks here. I have to be honest, when I was first asked to moderate the panel, I thought, okay, not another conversation. We've talked and talked and talked, which is still good because you can learn in talking. But what I want to be different and what I think will be different this time is that I can lend my voice to the conversation as a media person, and I can help steer and guide the conversation to action. So I said, yes, I'll do it. So here I am. So let's get into the conversation by first meeting who our panelists are.
A native Charlottean, Jasmine Nivens knew in high school she wanted to be a police officer. Now, 6 years on the job with CMPD, she normally patrols West Charlotte. But during the protests, she spent hours uptown working to keep the peace as a member of the department's constructive conversation team.
I want people to see us as humans. We're the same. The only thing that is different is the fact that I wear this uniform to work.
As publisher of the alternative newspaper Queen City Nerve, Justin LaFrancois went live on Facebook every night during the protests, giving an unfiltered view of what was happening. He was right in the middle of 4th Street the night when police cornered protesters.
We're trapped here. We're trapped. They're shooting pepper balls at us. They've thrown out tear gas, flashbangs.
At age 27, he's passionate about the Black Lives Matter movement and his role in telling the story.
I'm inundated with messages from people saying, I love your live streams and it's making me think of life in a whole new way, as it has done for me. I'm not the same person that I was 4 weeks ago at all.
Cass Otley is an undisputed leader in the fight for equity in Charlotte. She's lived here for 22 years, has organized countless peaceful protests, and believes it's time to rethink the way CMPD operates, not only its tactics, but also its budgets.
If we took some of that money and put it into the underserved communities, into some after-school programs, into some job creation, we wouldn't have the crime that we have.
In 1 week, CMPD Chief Kerr Putney will retire, and stepping into the role will be current Deputy Chief Johnny Jennings, a 28-year veteran of the department.
I want to be known as the best police chief this department has ever seen.
Supporters have called Jennings an ideal fit for the job, saying he leads with integrity and professionalism. There's no doubt, however, he will face major challenges from day one. The youngest member of our panel is Righteous Kit, a 19-year-old rising sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill. He graduated with honors last year from Philip O'Berry High School and was president of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council. He's emerged as one of the top young voices in Charlotte's peaceful protest movement.
If people aren't willing to change, they have to move. They have to get out the way because this message that Black Lives Matter is important.
All right, so here we are. I'm so glad you guys are here. I know you're excited. I know you're eager to start talking, right? Okay, because that's what we're doing. All right, so I want to do like a temperature gauge or a temperature check. You have on your lap these white chalkboards or billboards and a marker. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I want everyone to answer the question, and then we're going to allow you, just turn it over once you answer it, and then we'll come back around one by one and let you show how you answered, and then we'll explain why a little later on. Okay, y'all ready? So the question is, when I say the word police, what is the first word that comes to your mind? what is the first thing you think about? When I say the word police, write it down, turn it over, and then we'll go around the room and have some conversation about it. I'm going to give you a few more minutes. I'm sorry, Justin, I forgot you a little gimpy
all right.
over there. That's okay.
I had to write a check earlier today, and it took the longest it's ever taken to write anything.
All right, so we ready? So Jasmine, why don't we start with you?
I wrote protect because we protect and serve. After I wrote protect, I thought about writing my own name, and that would have sufficed as well.
Okay. Protect.
I wrote violence.
All right, so you don't have to answer why yet. Yes.
Jasmine
Chief.
cheated off me, but I wrote protect also. I think that we have a duty to serve and protect the community. And when we think of police, what does that really mean to the community? It means to protect the community from violence and criminal activity. So.
Okay. Cass?
I wrote fear.
Wow. We're going to come back to that. And Righteous?
I wrote change.
Wow. Okay, well, let's talk about why. You kind of course, said, Jasmine, why you wrote protect.
Right.
Justin, you want to tell us why you wrote violence is the first word you think of when you hear police.
Absolutely. I totally get where both of you are coming from, as that is supposed to be what it is, but no matter how much good any officer on any police force around the country does, what is exemplified is any escalation of violence. We see it in the streets during the protests. We see it during certain situations with one-on-one confrontations with people in low-income neighborhoods and things like that. And the whole goal of police reform and defunding the police is de-escalation and reducing those violent confrontations. And even if they're 1 in a million, they're readily exemplified. They're on videos that are spread virally on the internet, and they're one after the other.
Yeah. All right, Chief, you already talked about protect. Did you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, you know, I think it's unfortunate. He has a good point that when you see things happening, what we're portrayed in the media and things that you see that really take off and are big news items are the things that deal with violence and the things that we really make us uncomfortable ourselves. So the great work, he mentioned the great work that a lot of officers do. And in my opinion, I think it's unfortunate that more of that great work is not what's portrayed, and we're portrayed more as when things are going bad, when things are at their worst. So it'd be nice to change that narrative. I get it that sometimes the violence and the controversy is what people strive to hear and see, and we need to be able to change that narrative within our agency. So,
Cass, fear.
Just things I've experienced, being out on the street, peacefully protesting, and just being approached in a real aggressive manner. At one protest, I was talking to a young lady, and one of the officers on the bikes actually hit me and tried to knock me down. And I was so shocked at first that he purposely hit me, and another officer was actually trying to talk to him while he was yelling and screaming at me. You know, so, I mean, I've been out in the streets for a really long time, and I've experienced a lot of things. So when I see, I'm even reluctant to call the police when something happens at this point.
Really?
I had a minor car accident. The guy ahead of me got hit by a tire that came off a truck. And I told him I don't want to call the police. I actually was afraid to call the police. Wow. So, yeah. So,
yeah.
You know, I want that to change. I want us to work for that to change, but you know, the fear is very real because I've experienced things in life to make it real. It's not something I've seen on TV. It's not something that I read. It's a compilation of things that I've experienced throughout my life.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Righteous.
Actually, I wrote change mainly because he mentioned the good side of police, and she mentioned the poor side of police, and I've seen them both. I've seen both in real life, how I've done toy drives with police officers when I was in the 9th grade, and then, you know, 2 years later, you see Keith Lamar Sky shot. 2 years after that, Danquarius Franklin shot. You see all of these negative police interactions. You see how on the 6th of June, they encased a lot of protesters and then just shot tear gas canisters at them. I see that there are both good and bad to the police But what I also know and what I recognize is that for as long as I can remember, these things have continued to happen, and there hasn't been any change whatsoever. And I am a firm believer that we need to reallocate the funds that we have given to the police officers that have over-militarized our police and use those to help our community in other ways. And until that changes, until that day, I don't think that we're going to be solving anything.
Yeah. That's interesting, and we're going to slide into defunding the police in just a second. But first, I want to go back to what I heard you say, Chief, when you said, I wish that we could change the narrative. And I know, Jasmine, you've talked about changing it as well. And then when you hear Justin say what he said, as well as Cass, how does it make you feel, though? And how do we begin? How does it make you feel? That's the first question.
Well, you know, I get it. I understand it. We've been hearing it for years. And as much as we try, I mean, we average about 600,000 encounters with citizens every year. It only takes one or two to make that, like you said, it all disappears. Anything good, most encounters are very peaceful, but very cordial. You know, don't result in any type of incidents at all. But when you have those incidents that do occur, and you know, I think you mentioned something about. Well, let's talk about humanizing what we do. As long as humans are police officers, we're going to make mistakes. The question is, what do we do when those mistakes are made? When we step outside of policy, and we hear accountability all the time. That's a key word, a buzzword with police these days. So what exactly does accountability means? It means that when somebody does step out of the lines, that we're going to take action to correct that, to correct whatever that action was that was negative and puts us in a bad light. So, but I don't want to ever discount the great work. I mean, over 60 programs that we have that we are working with youth in youth diversion programs and summer programs that we do. But all of that, it means nothing when it comes down to the point of violence or brutality or racism that we've seen across the country. So.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that, Jasmine?
Like
what you've seen and how you feel?
Right.
About...
So I know your initial question was, how did I feel seeing violence and fear? I'll be honest, it hurts, but it's real, and people need to officers around the country need to hear that's how people feel, and that's how they view us. But I'll be honest, it does hurt, but it's a reality. So.
Wow. All right, so let's talk about some resolve then. You hear the hot button, the word now is defund the police. And Justin and Cass, I want you guys to kind of speak to that. What does that look like? And Righteous, you too.
Well, if you look at our budget right here, you have the CMPD getting about 40% of the budget, which to me is crazy. When you have housing getting, I think it's either 6 or 9% of the budget. So when you look at the amount of money that CMPD is getting, if we just took, I'll say roughly $100 million from that and gave them still $190 million, we could really get some affordable housing, some programs, some job development, and then we wouldn't have the type of crime and things the violence that we have go on. We have crime and violence because people don't have jobs, people don't have a living wage, people don't have affordable housing. There are no after-school programs for these kids. So a lot of that is what that is. So if we took that money and reallocated it back into the community, we wouldn't have the problems that we have.
Do you see that being the case too, Justin?
Oh, absolutely. I was having this conversation, or argument, I guess, last night with somebody about, it was in affluent white suburbia, and, talking about how the opportunities and education that their kids are afforded that aren't available on, say, the west side or the northwest side or anywhere in the crescent of Mecklenburg County. And it's all about reallocating those funds into community outreach programs like Jumpstart for violence interruption and education, and anything that affords somebody the equal opportunity as somebody who is well off to make something of themselves. And where we got to talking is like how they're being taught to give back to their community and be charitable, and I feel like people are starting to see people from low-income and impoverished neighborhoods as a charitable donation. It's not a charity case. They're people who could do not only the same things that you could do, but potentially better if they had the opportunity to do that.
So you had that conversation with a friend? Argument
With somebody, yes.
Okay, an associate.
Yeah, and you know, it's just like when you pull money from those neighborhoods and from the people who need it the most, and you put it somewhere else, and now they don't have the opportunity to learn or have their violence interrupted, which causes crime. Maybe people need to steal, which causes the necessity for police to show up,
Right.
which means they get more money to have more things to combat that stuff than rather taking the smart route and just cutting it out from that young age.
So we took this question to the street. So we're going to go to a quick video just to see what their response was or question was.
I heard a lot about defunding the police. What in terms does that really mean, defunding the police? Does it means lack of training or lack of funds to more equipment that's going to use to help the community? If so, we don't want to lose the aspect of the training. I believe more of the training will be more successful in trying to curb all of this violence that's going on today.
So this viewer was saying that they don't want to lose the aspect of training. When you talk about defunding the police, can you speak to that, Chief?
As far as training is concerned, absolutely. We talk about training every time something comes up or there's an incident that happens, and there's always, police need training. We need more training, and that's often said without even knowledge of what training we actually do.
Right.
I'll give an example. If we want to put all of our officers through an 8-hour training course, we're going to take a year and a half to even get through that. When we talk about training, you also have to understand that when those officers are taken out on top of mandatory training we already have, when they're taken put into a classroom, we also understand they're taken off the street, so they're not out there to protect and serve. So we have to really be careful and selective on the training and what are we going to get. And we use the term training. I don't really even like that. I was on a panel last night, and one of the gentlemen that was on there with us, he hit the nail on the head and said that it's not training, it's education. Training means you go in a classroom, you listen to what the instructor says, you walk out, and maybe you practice that when you get back and perform your duties. Education means you're going to practice it all the time, and it's ongoing. So we have to really kind of look at what we're talking about when we demand more training or ask more training for the officers.
Mm-hmm. And then to me, just what kind of person becomes a police officer? I mean, is there any kind of psychological evaluation?
Yes.
Is there any way to test to see that they don't have biases?
Yeah, we have multiple psychological evaluations coming in, biases as well, and we have to get better though. I mean, it's, as hard as we try, any corporation or any organization as large as ours, you're gonna have some that slip through the cracks, and that's unfortunate. But we have to be able to intervene early. We talk about early intervention systems that police officers are now trying to do across the country. Charlotte was one of the very few in the country. University of Chicago came in and helped us develop an early intervention system. So those are the things that I think need to improve across the country, and you be able to identify them coming in and then also continue to identify them after they get in to make sure we're keeping the right people on the job.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap up this segment, I know it went by really fast, didn't it? Do any of you all have questions for the police officers here? So I would say Justin and Cass and even Righteous, you've been out in the forefront with the protests. Is there something that you would want to, not that I'm putting you on the spot, Chief, but what would you want to say to them as far as your experience? What can make it better? How can they not feel fearful and that there's violence when they think about police? What would you want to say to the police officers?
In response to the training education thing that you were just talking about, huge concern is who responds to calls on somebody who's experiencing a mental health crisis. Because there is a story about, I can't remember their name, but it was a few years ago where he had an interaction with officers the day before, talked about how he hated taking his medications because it made him feel like a robot, and then the next day he had an interaction with officers again. This was all on body cam. He pulled out a knife and was shot to death. So when somebody is responding to a situation that they're not necessarily capable of handling or de-escalating, you know, how do you see that in the future? What are the steps?
That's an excellent question, because there's even questions about whether police should even be called when someone's in a mental health crisis. So community policing, the crisis response team is our CPCRT team that we developed last year. Have done a phenomenal job. I think they work hand in hand with a clinician, and they're doing those exact same things that you're talking about as far as ensuring that someone's taking their medication, they're getting the assistance that they need, they're following up with referrals, and they're, you know, I think it was several thousand, 3,000 or 4,000 calls for service that they were dispatched on last year and responded to. So there are ways to do it, and I don't want to take up too much time. We could talk all day just on that topic alone, as far as who should be responding to those individuals who are having a mental health crisis. And I don't think it's the police alone. I think there's a room for us to do it, but it should not be us alone.
Right. And I'd like to piggyback on that as well. We do have CPCRT, but there are also certain officers on typically just about any and every shift within the division that are CIT certified, and that's Crisis Intervention Team. I'm not on that team, but whenever someone calls 911, they can also request a CIT certified officer to respond as well, and then beyond that, you can the officer on scene can then request CPCRT.
Great point. There's about 40% of our patrol officers approximately are CIT certified.
Do you know if the dispatcher asks if they would?
Right, because
I'm
down
like
with 911. I don't have time to say, oh,
they do,
Right.
and we also put out to the community to, as best we can, if you're having that situation, request a CIT officer. Dispatch knows if it's a mental health crisis call for service, they have on their roll sheet when they're dispatching those calls, where are my CIT officers? The CIT officers are also trained to take those calls for service when they hear them go out if they feel like an officer that's been dispatched is not CIT. So we try to cover every angle to make sure we send the right person to those calls.
That's a lot of work if I'm in an emergency. I don't know if I'm thinking about all of that.
It's really not. I mean,
It's
the
not? So
computer-
now we know, just ask for.
Right.
Oh, yes. Even if you don't, if that's the type of call for service we're dispatching to, the dispatcher is immediately able to find that CIT officer and dispatch them there. So we have options.
And you're totally right that we could have that conversation all day.
Yes.
Because then it's like, if there wasn't any notification of the fact that it was a mental health crisis,
Right.
would the officer that shows up radio in, I need a CIT officer, or would they just go to handle the situation themselves because it would be escalating and
They're already there.
So
And they're already
me
there.
being on patrol, you know, I've contacted CPCRT numerous times, and we also request medic as well. So it just kind of depends on the responding officer, but most of the time we will request for a CIT certified officer if that wasn't already listed in the call, or we will request for CPCRT.
May I go?
Yes.
I'm assuming that you don't support the idea of defunding or reallocating the funds from CMPD to go into somewhere else. And I wanted to ask you specifically, in a community where a lot of people don't feel like they can trust the police for just about, a lot of people don't feel like they can trust the police for a lot of various issues, whether it's I'm getting pulled over, or there's been an accident, I don't feel safe calling the police, or I've been sexually assaulted, I don't feel safe calling the police, or there are so many other options and different variations. What do you think the solution is on your part to creating a space where we feel comfortable? If you don't feel like defunding the police and creating other avenues for people to get that help, what do you think is next? How are you going to solve it?
I wasn't totally against it until Cass said half our budget. That kind of concerned me a little bit.
That wasn't half.
It was close. But you know, and let me touch on that. I'm glad you asked that, and I hope we have time because we don't.
I'm sorry. Can
Gotcha.
you just put a pause in it, because when
Yes.
we come back, we want to answer your question for sure. Don't forget it, because I
got
forget
you.
stuff.
Good question.
We're coming back to talk about the dreaded R question, or the dreaded R word, racism. Keep joining the conversation. Thank you.